Hey, it's Mike with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Wednesday. It's December 7th. This will be our chart lesson for the day. And as you can see, looking at the daily chart, prices, this was a range day, and you kind of see by the type bar we get on the daily chart. We did close lower. We did push lower. Um, it looks like we were really stuck between the previous support acting as resistance now and between um, the green band here. So looks like prices just kind of got hung in that area, and there's nothing really. There's no news today, so nothing to drive it higher or really drive it lower, and prices just kind of chopped around sideways. And it's real obvious on the other chart, but you can see it with the kind of a neutral bar here. We did close down though, so still kind of in that negative overtone. Um, and this was a hard range day. I'll talk about that when we get over there because it wasn't consistently off the same highs and lows, although there were some smaller, tighter ranges inside that you got a chance to trade, and there were some trends inside the range that you got a chance to trade too. Um, but I tell people, if you're struggling, it's really hard to know what prices are doing on days like this if prices don't consistently off turn down off the highs, which if we were trading this trading range, you'd want them to turn down consistently off this high or turn up consistently off these lows. And you still have to have a good signal bar too. And if you're not getting that, it's hard to trade a range. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes these days are better off just take the day off if you're not sure. So anyway, let's flip over to the 2000 tick chart and we'll take a look at it and we'll go through the trades. And I probably marked more trades than I really wanted today. But if you understand what's going on, you're reading the chart properly, there's trades there. They're just a lot harder to find, and you better be sure about them as well. Anyway, let's flip over there and take a look. Okay, here's our 2000 tick chart, and you can see it's clearly a range here. We were just up and down, and there was definitely no consistency at the highs. We had a little bit of consistency later in the day from about 9 o'clock on at the lows. So that one made it a little bit easier, but it was really tough trying to find these setups off the highs. Uh, but anyway, you can see it there. Uh, Started off, we were in this, looked like we were going to go lower, and then we were headed higher. So that you have a good idea that it maybe is a range day at that point. Although this was a really strong two-legged move up, but it sold off just as quickly as hard, and then we're up. And anytime you see prices consistently above and below, above and below, above and below the EMA, then you know it's a range day. Or even if it's trending a little bit to one way or the other, if it's consistently above and below the EMA, you can trade it both ways. When you consistently get above the EMA like this, only look for longs until it's consistently below the EMA like this, and then only look for shorts. So I hope that makes sense. But let's zoom in here and take a look. And 7 o'clock came just as we're kind of reversing back here. You can't really do anything with this at this point, but then suddenly you come up here and you make a first entry, second entry, uh, right off the trend line, right off the EMA. We had a little bit of support right in the same area before, and even right here. So I like going long there. That's a double bottom as well, based on those two lows. Turns out to be a pretty nice move, and then we get our break, new high. And it looks like we're going to go lower here. I don't see any setups that I would take to go lower right there. And then suddenly it reverses back and you get a first entry short and then a second entry short. I marked this one green. It's a little congested. It's kind of a different failed second entry short. You really have to know what you're doing here. But notice how we went lower here and then it went higher again. So when it went below that little two bar matching low again, that's a second entry short. And so when it breaks above this bar, it's quickly a failure. And that's a really nice move up there. It's not the greatest setup. It is a trap though. It's not one that a lot of weak traders are probably going to recognize though. So you can see it took a little bit to take off, so it doesn't really act like a real strong trap, and eventually it does go much higher, but it takes some momentum and more people coming back in, and then people probably realize, hey, we're probably looking at another leg up here. Prices are going to tempt another leg, and you can see we basically got a perfect measured move almost there. So, and of course we do have the break here. We actually had a break in new high here, but I think this was just a continuation of it. But if you wanted, it wouldn't hurt to draw this trend. It runs up through here like so. And of course, it really looks like you get a close or two outside here to move to a new high, but then suddenly you get a lower high, and look how far away you are from the EMA. So I like that short right there. Very bearish bar. Just to try to ride it back to the EMA to minimum, and maybe it turns back down again, which it does end up doing. I don't think you get a huge runner on that or anything. There's a little hidden second entry here, but not a very good signal bar, and it's just not a very good setup. We drop on back down pretty quickly. This is one that might have got some people. Notice how we're coming down here. We get a little bit of an overshoot, which usually leads to a reversal. It doesn't on that first move back, but when you come back here, we do get a break. And there's a little trend channel here, and there's a close outside a new high. And that's a second entry. And you would expect prices to possibly make a new low here, but we kind of overshot that a couple of times. So I'd be careful with this one. If you took this one, it's like I think it's exactly 5 ticks in there, so I don't think it's enough that you would have got out. It would have been a loser. Yeah, there's 5 ticks there, so you would have had to get a little better entry than 1 tick below that bar, because otherwise it's a 1 tick failure, and it would have stopped you out only to go lower. And then it bounces here. And notice you got a break, move to a new low, and you get a first entry. It turns down again, turns back up. I don't think I would trade this on the engulfing bar, but if it breaks above that, you really need. I'd probably want enough room to get out before the EMA, because it could cause some resistance. So to do that, I think you have to let this break higher and drop a limit order in here, and you might have got to field a tick or two back. Just make sure you got enough room to get out, or else I'd skip that trade. No other chances to get in this. You get a close outside new high, and then you're rocketing down, and nothing there, nothing to get long here. And then finally you get notice the new low, first entry, second entry that fails, but it's also a new swing high here. So you get a first entry pull back. When it breaks higher, that's a second entry long. And so that's probably going to trap some people, and you can see that it actually pulls up and pulls back one more time, and then takes off again. This one doesn't really take off. I mean, it rockets up, but it sells off pretty quickly. So, but it turns out to be a good move. And then you get another second entry here. Of course, you get your close outside, first entry, pulls back, and that's pretty bearish. So when that fails, if it breaks higher, you'll probably get a nice move out of that, because that's probably going to suck some shorts in, and you can see it probably did. And then so now you got your close outside the green one, new high, and you're just kind of chopping sideways to down. I don't see anything there that I like. You do get a close outside, move to a new low, and then a higher low. I like going long right there. You don't know if it's going to run all the way back to the highs or not, but I would figure you'd probably at least test the highs across here again. This thing just kind of gets some momentum here and takes off. There's no consistency up here really, so it's hard to know. I mean, this did close right about where this last one did, but I'd wait on a lower high, and you don't get one here. It just falls, and then of course it makes a triple test down here and then bounces. And even though you got a triple test here, I don't think you want to go long, because this is still in play, and that's a fairly large move. We are a long way away from the EMA, and it is a triple test, but I would wait, because you could get burned on that one. We did have a failed breakout up here, which could lead to a move to the other side. It's what you would expect to happen, but it doesn't. It just reverses and goes higher again. Really, at this point, we're still kind of in a weak up trend. I think I talked about that on the mid-morning chart, that we were in a kind of a weak up trend, and we just have to see if this resistance holds up here, which it did. We got a failed breakout, but it doesn't take long before we're rocketing lower and we're back in the testing the lows of the range again. So I just don't see anything there that you can trade. This one is tempting, but again, we're still making higher highs and higher lows even in this little range. So I would want to wait on a lower high here after that failed breakout. I mean, you might take that trade, uh, but the problem is, notice you had a couple more really nice. Of course, this one's right into the lows, and this one's right at the midline. Um, it does leave enough room here if you push through the midline. Um, but you can see you would have got trapped there, and that's the problem here. You really want something. You really want to see this thing break lower and maybe come back and test that and give you a prove that we're going to go lower. And right here, you just don't have any proof yet. I marked it green, but you could have got burned just like if you'd have taken that one, you'd have got burned. There was a couple of trades here today that you would have got burned. The other one was that second entry I talked about earlier right there. Um, so there's a couple of trades here that looked pretty good, but if you're, if you're trying to get a little aggressive, you might get burned on them. And this is another one here. Notice you make a triple test here. You're coming down, and you did have a failed breakout. You try to go higher once, twice, three times, and look how bearish that is. If it breaks lower there, you're probably going to go on down. But you wouldn't have far to go to make a new low all the same. So, but there's a good chance we're at least going to come back and test these lows here. And we could come all the way down to the last lows we've been making down here, and they've been pretty consistent. And that's what happened. So if you catch that, it's probably the trade of the day. But I just don't know that I'd risk that or not. It's not a, it's a little bit sideways. It's a little bit congested. It looks like a little trading range, even though I didn't draw it there. It sure looks like one. You can see the thing is it does close outside it there, where nothing else could. So if it breaks lower, it may go on down. But it's still something it's an aggressive trade. I'd be real questionable about that trade. We do bounce down here again. There's not rejection here though. We're just kind of working sideways. And then finally it bounces out of there. You get a first entry, it pushes up, you pull back, you get a second entry short. And if it breaks above that, it's a failure. And it could take on off to the other side again. The failure sets up and you can get a scalp out of that, but you don't get much more. And the next thing you know, it looks like we're in a range. You get a triple test here. 1, 2, 3. Nice bearish bar. Fairly low risk, 7 ticks. I like going short there. And really what you're looking for is, can you get out before these last few lows in here? And you got plenty of room there. And it actually goes lower and it reverses again, but you don't have much room to this high here, so I don't think you can trade that one. And I don't think I would trade the engulfing bar. And here we are again. We break out. This one's tempting again. You got a little, I didn't draw it. You got a little channel there with a break and a new high, but the signal bar is not great there. Wait and see if you get something else, and a few minutes later you get a first entry, second entry that fails, and notice how we close back inside that little range area again. Fairly bearish. That's the one you want to take. And then it bounces again. Again, you got a very bearish bar, and it would have worked, but I mean we made a higher high here than the last couple of highs. So that tells me I'm going to wait on a lower high. And you don't get anything till way down here. And again, that one's tempting, but it could bounce on that midline and you could get stuck there. It's you want to try to get something a little higher. You want to get short a little higher up here. And we come down here and bounce. And same thing here. You're going long into the kind of the midline there, but it does have to break above it to trigger your trade here. And we have, the last couple of times we've been going from high to low. So this one's close. You could argue for it to be green too. Um, but this has been pretty consistent resistance down, or support down here, where this is, we're breaking out here. You made a higher high, lower high, higher high, where all of these are pretty consistent. So I like that one a little more. You don't get a run or anything, but it moves up. And on these range days like this, you don't get many runners. And again, you're chopping sideways, a little failed breakout that comes back and tests this breakout area. Nice bullish bar. I like going long there. You're just trying to get out before here, and maybe it goes higher, which it does. But you can see it ends up inside the range a minute before it goes higher. Nothing to be able to trade here. You're turning down, but there's a reversal, or it's not really a reversal, it's a failed second entry long, but it doesn't set up properly. It's too congested. There's a few first entries, and then next thing you know, you're bouncing down here again. You get another overshoot. This one's tempting here, and it does look like a little bit of an overshoot, but I would wait. And again, you get a little break higher and a turn down. So, and you might get a retest of this low, but you did have an overshoot. So I don't think I like that one, especially with that big bar right there with no body, because it could break lower and come back and just end up going sideways, kind of like some of this stuff. So I don't think I would trade that. It doesn't really, it is a failure, but it doesn't set up properly. It does close on the other side, but it's too big a chance we push higher there. And we do push higher. It would have been enough to get you out, but I just didn't like it. I did mark this one, and I went back and forth whether this one should be red or green. But notice you made the new high. You got the break here at a new high. Now you're working down. And this does confirm the trend line, but it's a first entry, second entry, but it's also a first entry, second entry long that fails. Normally I'd probably tell you to skip that, but because it's a second entry and a failure, and it does confirm that trend line, you'll probably get a scalp out of that. We'll at least probably test this low, and we may test all the way back down to here, and you can see this thing works down to the last low, kind of gets a bounce, and then turns back down again. So it would have been a quick, easy scalp. Nothing much more than that out of it. And then we drop down here, and then you get another first entry, second entry. Again, this is one that you got to kind of question, because we've already got a break a new low, and we just bounced off the lows where we bounced a few times. But that is a second entry short. It is pretty bearish. And sometimes you get another leg, and we might at least attempt another leg, and we actually do get a second leg down, and then it turns up. So, again, it's real close to being green. And if you didn't like it, you could argue for it to be green for sure. And then, of course, you do get your two legs down, and then you get a second entry long right here. On a failed break lower, and look how consistent that's been. So it's probably going to fail. I like going long there. It's a little aggressive. You probably want to get a higher low or something, but you don't get that till here, and then it's congested and it's into 230. So maybe you take that. I marked it green. And yeah, this is just, these days can be difficult. And really, you just almost have to use these trends and follow the rules on your micro trend lines and trend channels. Without them, and even with them, there were a couple in here that might have tripped you up. Again, this is the main one I know somebody will ask me about, and there's just not much you can do about it. If you risk taking these, which most of the time they'll work, but sometimes you get that second leg up, and you do here, and it would have stopped you out. So not much you can do about it if you took it. Generally, you try to wait on a lower high, but you don't always get one. You don't get one here, and next thing you know, it's way down here. So these are the kind that sometimes when you have a loser, this is the kind that'll get you. So it just, follow the rules. You're better off to skip that trade than to, let it trip you up. So wait on the sure things. It is a second entry, and usually they're going to work. But this overshoot twice here, and the fact that we bounced multiple times across here now says be real careful right here because of the overshoot, because we could just reverse and take, excuse me, I'm still struggling with this cough when I get to talking a lot, but we could just reverse here and take on off. So just be careful with those overshoots like that, especially at strong support where it's bounced a few times. But anyway, yeah, not an easy trading day. I'm just going to tell you that it's not an easy trading day. And when I got done, I was surprised I marked as many trades as I did. But what you're doing is you're basically trading these small trends within here, and some few of them are traps and things like that as well. So, but anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Today is Wednesday. Believe it or not, tomorrow is Thursday. We're going to wrap up the week, and probably not many trading days left in this month. I'm not sure yet exactly when I'm going to take off, but I will take at least probably the last 2 weeks of the year off. We'll talk about that more next week, and I'll probably get an idea of how next week will probably be it, probably. But we'll clarify that next week. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again tomorrow to wrap up our week. Hope you had a good trading day. Again, when you see these days and you're struggling, just close up and don't try to trade them. Or better yet, just go to sim and sim trade and practice and work on it, and then study those trades in your chart real well. And probably after the fact, it was easy to see why this was a hard day. But it's amazing how many people will say, "Man, how do you trade this?" And it's just hard to trade because you want a range where you got consistent bounces every time right off these lows and consistent reverses right off these highs. And when you do that and you get a good signal bar, I mean it's real easy. It's almost, I mean, they're gimmies almost. But when you're turning at different places every time and it's not consistent, like there's nothing consistent of these highs, and early it was not consistent out of the lows. We had a pretty consistent bounces off the lows here today. Even the one breakout, it fails like you would expect and turns back in. So just keep that in mind. Be careful on these days. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. We'll be back again to do it tomorrow. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.